So we are back with the podcast reaction for week 5. We're starting it off with a podcast by Logan Anderson called Say the Damn Score. It was episode 141. He had special guest Adam Young, who is the director of broadcasting at New Mexico State University. To start it off, I think one of the important things he touched upon early was relationships with others in the station and within the network. And they talked about, he has a great relationship with their radio announcer and a relationship with, the PA announcing and PA broadcaster. And I think it's one thing that I learned doing my undergrad, whether you're a SID, whether you're an athletic director, relationships with people in your department and in general are by far your most important feature. It'll help you build relations and build connections with these people, and it'll help you go farther in the industry, but it also help them, and you can bring out confidence in them as well. I think the one thing that I was surprised to hear is how much he actually covers. I know, like, a lot of times at schools, depending on how many they have, they will have broadcasting like students, and they'll have them do a lot of the games as well. But to hear that he almost broadcasts practically every single sport is kind of crazy. So I can only imagine what his schedule is like and what his preparation schedule is like. So as he kind of touched upon it, it's a lot of hours. And he said, but he did actually say some wasn't as bad as when he did pro ball, just because like in pro baseball things were a little bit different. And that also brings us into our next subject where it kind of depends when you're broadcasting these players like all year long. It's like, how often do you bring certain things up? So they mentioned they call it Antonio Gating. Antonio Gates was a tight end for the San Diego Chargers, played for many, many years, but he also did play college basketball at Kent State and was one of the better players on the team. And they kind of talked about, like how many times do you mention that during a season before it becomes too repetitive? And I think that's one thing touched on that depending on what a student does and everything like that. How many times do you mention their life outside of the sport on a seasonal basis? Like how many games should you touch upon that? So I thought that was very interesting to look at and kind of touch upon as well. So I thought his podcast was I thought it was a pretty good informational packet on broadcasting and being that I'm kind of into the broadcasting industry as well. I think it was some good notes that I got out of it. And for our second podcast, we had was gearing up for the 2022 Commonwealth Games, and it was by the Birmingham Games. And I thought the interview was very interesting as well. Kind of because they discussed a lot of how COVID has kind of changed the way that they do a lot of things, and especially being that like because they really haven't hosted there in a while, and the fact that because they really since they haven't hosted the games, it's a lot different from how it used to be. So they talked about, discussing how all the different broadcast networks are going to put their feet up in Birmingham and how they're going to make that work and how it's not the same as I just mentioned as before. And pretty much how that started was with the Tokyo Olympics was because of COVID, there weren't people that were sent over there. And they're used to sending everyone over and everyone covers everything, and how they normally would per country. But for Tokyo, they only sent one or two people over, and that's all. And Birmingham and people who set everything up figured, well, you know what? We can do the same thing. If we can do the same and set it up that way, where we can just have one or two representatives from each country and then set everything up with them and do everything like that, if make it easier, it'll be less people and it's less of a worry. And I think one of the things that I like that they mentioned was that the project management was a lot different, kind of like how I was mentioning all these different people, because in the stadiums that they were in, they're just used to covering rugby. Well, now they have to cover all different types of media outlets and put them all around the stadium, on top of covering a bunch of different teams and a bunch of different games. And, like he said, one of the big challenges he said, like where they broadcast their games, it's in a different spot. They have to move a bunch of people around. And it just pretty much was like a big hassle trying to plan this entire thing out as it was in the past. Because in the past, you had more people, but less people in media showing up. And now that you have less people, they're all in the media. So now you have to find a way to plug each and every single one into a spot around the stadium, make them all happy. And then, they got to do well by the country as well. Like you're setting an example. So, if they don't like what you did, that's an issue. You're putting like yourself as the host as a top notch host. So, it's a little bit tough. And, I think I can see why they had some disagreements and some disadvantages as well. This is COVID changed a lot. So, but that's what I found kind of interesting and neat about each podcast. And I think mainly they were both helpful in a sense. I think the one with Adam Young in New Mexico State, I think really kind of stood more out to me, more of what I want to do. So, but I think I really enjoyed both, and I think it was another good week with podcasts as well. So, yeah, that's it.